I'm Grace Mitchell. I'm 28. She is a gold digger, just like her mother, my father announced into the microphone, at my wedding reception, in front of 300 guests. The room went completely silent. My mother's hands shook at table 3. My grandmother gripped the edge of her chair. My brand new husband stood frozen beside the cake, and I, the bride in white, didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked to the DJ booth, smiled at the sound engineer, and pressed play on a recording that had been sitting in my phone for 11 months. What came out of those speakers changed everything. My father's face went white. A man at table 6 stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward my father with a manila envelope. That was 3 hours into my wedding. But the story starts 14 years before that night. My father thought he was exposing me. He didn't know I'd been waiting for him to try. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And if you don't mind, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to know. Now, let me take you back 14 years, to the night my mother packed 2 suitcases and told me we were leaving. I was 14 the night my mother left my father. She didn't warn me. She came into my room at 9:30 on a Tuesday, still wearing her nurse's scrubs, and said, "Pack what you need. We're going." I grabbed my backpack. Textbooks, a toothbrush, my phone charger. I didn't think to take the family photos on the hallway wall. I didn't know I'd never see them again. My father stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed. He didn't try to stop us. He didn't ask where we were going. He looked at my mother, then at me, and said 5 words I will never forget. "Go. Take the ungrateful one with you." I was 14. I hadn't done anything ungrateful. I'd made honor roll that semester. I'd cleaned the kitchen every Sunday without being asked. But I was standing next to my mother, and in my father's world, that made me the enemy. My mother drove in silence. I held my backpack on my lap and watched the streetlights blur. I didn't cry. I think I was too confused to cry. Within a week, my father called every relative on his side of the family. Aunts, uncles, cousins. His version of the story was simple and effective. "Karen left because she found someone else. She's been lying to me for years." That was a lie. My mother hadn't found anyone. There was no other man. But my father said it with such conviction, the wounded husband, the betrayed provider, that people believed him. The church believed him. His golf buddies believed him. Even my grandmother on his side believed him, and she'd known my mother for 16 years. Nobody called to ask me what happened. I was 14, and I was already invisible. My father didn't call me for 6 months. When I finally called him, he picked up on the 3rd ring. His voice was flat, bored almost. "If you're calling to ask for money, you're just like her." I hung up. I sat on the edge of my mother's rented bed, because I didn't have my own yet, and stared at the wall. But I didn't learn the real reason my mother left until 11 months before my wedding. And when I did, it changed everything. My mother worked the night shift at St. David's Memorial. 12 hours, sometimes 14. She'd come home at 6 in the morning, make me toast, check my homework, and fall asleep on the couch still in her scrubs. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment off Route 9. The carpet was beige and stained. The kitchen faucet dripped. My mother slept in the bedroom. I slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room and did my homework at the kitchen counter because we didn't own a desk. Meanwhile, my father lived in the 4-bedroom house my grandmother, his mother, had left him. Big yard, quiet street. The kind of neighborhood where people wave from their porches and know each other's dogs by name. During the divorce, my father told the court his income was lower than it actually was. My mother's lawyer was a legal aid attorney juggling 40 cases. He did his best. It wasn't enough. The judge signed off on a settlement that gave my mother $40,000. That's it. 14 years of marriage. 1 check. She never told me the number. I found out years later, 40,000. For a woman who'd put her nursing career on hold for 6 years to raise me while my father built his real estate business. My grandmother, my mother's mother, Maggie Brooks, helped when she could. She'd drive over with groceries, slip a 20 into my coat pocket when I wasn't looking. But she lived on a fixed income. Social Security and a small pension from the school district where she'd worked as a secretary for 31 years. At school, a girl in my English class asked me during lunch, Didn't your dad say your mom is a homewrecker? The rumor had traveled from my father's church circle to the school parking lot in under a month. I ate the rest of my sandwich in the bathroom stall. I kept my grades up. I didn't have a choice. Scholarships were my only way out. And when the acceptance letter came, full ride, state university, my mother held it in both hands and cried harder than the night we left. My father didn't know I'd been accepted. I didn't tell him. He never asked. Your mother didn't leave because she's weak, sweetheart, my grandmother told me once, sitting at her kitchen table. She left because she's brave. I wanted to believe that. It took me a long time. I graduated summa cum laude, full scholarship, no debt. I became an English teacher at a public high school 20 minutes from my mother's apartment. The pay wasn't glamorous, $46,000 a year before taxes, but it was mine, every dollar. I graded papers at night. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic. I bought my groceries at Aldi and packed my lunches in Tupperware. And I tried to keep a relationship with my father. I don't know why. Maybe because I still remembered being 6 years old, sitting on his shoulders at the county fair, believing he was the tallest man alive. Maybe because part of me thought if I just showed up enough, he'd finally see me. He'd call a few times a year, always with conditions. Come to Thanksgiving, but don't bring your mother's drama. So I went, alone. I sat at the table where I'd eaten every Thanksgiving of my childhood, and across from me sat a woman named Vanessa Reed. My father introduced her as a friend. She was 42, blonde highlights, French manicure. She sat in my mother's chair. I smiled. I ate the turkey. I said, "Everything's delicious," to a woman who had replaced my mother at her own dining table. My aunts and uncles treated me like a guest, polite, distant, careful. Uncle Jim patted my shoulder and said, "Your dad's been through a lot. Don't make it harder." I was 24. I had a full-time job, a clean apartment, and a savings account I'd built from nothing. But in that house, I was still the girl who picked the wrong side. I kept going back every Thanksgiving for 3 years. I swallowed their looks and their silence and their careful kindness that was worse than cruelty, because at least cruelty is honest. Until the year I met Daniel, and everything shifted. I met Daniel Prescott at a coffee shop near my school. He was sitting at the corner table with a stack of property files, a cold latte, and a pen behind his ear. He looked up when I knocked his briefcase off the chair, reaching for a napkin. I apologized. He laughed. He had a quiet laugh, the kind that starts in the eyes before it reaches the mouth. He was a real estate attorney at a small firm downtown, not flashy, no corner office. He drove a Subaru and wore the same 3 ties in rotation. But he listened. Really listened. Not the kind of listening where someone waits for you to finish so they can talk. The kind where you feel heard in your bones. We dated for 2 years, slow, steady. He never once asked about my father's money. He didn't know there was any to ask about. When I introduced Daniel to my father, Richard was polite. Cool. He shook Daniel's hand, asked about his firm, and smiled with his mouth, but not his eyes. After dinner, when Daniel went to the restroom, my father leaned across the table and said, "He's a lawyer? You know what lawyers do, right? They dig into people's business." I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. He was talking to himself. Daniel proposed on a Sunday morning in my apartment. No fancy restaurant, no skywriting. He made pancakes, put the ring in his pocket, and said, "I want every Sunday to be like this." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I called my father to tell him. 10 seconds of silence. Then, "I hope he knows what he's getting into." That was his congratulations. What I didn't know yet was that the day after that phone call, my father picked up the phone again. Not to plan a celebration, but to start a campaign. He called Aunt Linda, Uncle Jim, his church friends. The message was the same everywhere. Grace is marrying a rich lawyer. She's changed. She's just like her mother. The seeds were planted months before the wedding. I just hadn't felt them growing yet. 11 months before the wedding, a Saturday afternoon. I was at my mother's apartment helping her pack boxes. She was downsizing, moving to a smaller place because even the 1-bedroom on Route 9 had gotten too expensive. We were sorting through the hall closet when I found a shoebox on the top shelf, old sneakers inside, a few receipts, a folded piece of paper. And underneath everything, a USB drive with a strip of masking tape on it. Someone had written on the tape in blue ink, "From V. You should hear this." "Mom, what is this?" My mother looked at the USB. Her face went still, not surprised, not confused. Still, the way a person gets when something they buried a long time ago comes back up through the dirt. "Put it back, Grace." "What is it?" She didn't answer. She reached for it. I pulled my hand away. I went to the kitchen, opened my laptop, plugged in the USB, one audio file, 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, slightly slurred, late at night from the sound of it. He was leaving a voicemail for Vanessa. She hadn't picked up. "Hey babe, it's me. Karen's lawyer is useless. I moved the house, Mom's house, into the LLC last month. She'll never find out. By the time the judge signs off, it's done." I stopped breathing. "And Grace? Don't worry about her. She's an ungrateful brat. She chose Karen. Fine, she gets nothing, just like her mother." His voice kept going, casual, almost cheerful. "Once this is settled, you move in. This house is ours. Karen will never know." The file ended. Silence. I sat on my mother's kitchen floor and played it again, and again. The third time I wasn't listening for the words anymore. I was listening for the man I thought I knew. And he wasn't there. My mother stood in the doorway. She was crying. "Vanessa sent that to me after she and your father broke up," she said quietly. "I think she wanted to hurt him, or help me. I don't know. I kept it because I was afraid to use it, and I was afraid to throw it away." I sat on that floor for 2 hours. Then I called Daniel. "I need you to look at something," I said, "as a lawyer." Daniel came over that night. I handed him the USB without saying anything. He plugged it in, pressed play, listened with his hands folded on the table, the way he does when he's processing something serious. When it finished, he didn't speak for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up the county assessor's website, public property records, the kind anyone can search if they know where to look. It took him 11 minutes. "Grace," his voice was careful, "your grandmother's house, the one your father lives in, it was transferred into an LLC 18 months before the divorce was finalized. The LLC is registered to your father and a woman named Vanessa Reed." He turned the screen toward me. There it was, black and white, public record. The house my grandmother had left to my father, appraised at $680,000, had been quietly moved out of his name and into a shell company before the court ever divided anything. My mother received $40,000 in the divorce. She should have received half. "This is fraud," Daniel said. "Your mother can file a civil suit to recover her share. The voicemail isn't definitive on its own, but combined with the property records, it's strong." I drove to my mother's apartment the next morning. I showed her the records. I played the voicemail one more time. I laid it all out. She sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd done 14 years of crossword puzzles alone, and shook her head. "I don't want to fight him anymore, Grace." I wanted to scream. I didn't. "Okay, Mom." I kept everything. The USB, the records, the screenshots. I didn't plan to use any of it. Not then. Not at my wedding. That decision came later, because my father forced my hand, 6 months before the wedding. I sent my father an invitation. Cream cardstock, gold lettering. I'd paid for it with 2 weeks of tutoring money. I included a handwritten note inside. "I'd really like you to be there, Dad." He called the next day. "I'll be there," he said. And for one stupid, hopeful second, I thought maybe he'd changed. He hadn't. 2 weeks later, my Aunt Linda called me on a Tuesday evening. She sounded uncomfortable, the kind of uncomfortable that comes with delivering bad news you didn't ask to carry. "Honey, your dad is telling everyone you're marrying for money. He told me Daniel's some big-shot lawyer and you latched on. He said—" She paused. "He said, you're just like your mother." There it was. The same story. The same label. 14 years later, and he was still telling it. "I don't believe him," Linda said quickly. "But you should know, he's been calling people. Jim, Pastor Peters, even some of Daniel's family. He got numbers from the RSVP list." My stomach dropped. He'd contacted Daniel's family. the people I hadn't even met yet at that point, my future in-laws, and he was already poisoning them against me. I told Daniel that night. He sat on the edge of our bed, quiet for a long minute. Then, if you want him there, I support you. But I need you to know, Nathan and I have everything ready, just in case. Nathan Cole, Daniel's colleague, a family law attorney. I knew what just in case meant. I knew what was in the file Nathan had been building for weeks. The property records, the voicemail transcript, the civil complaint drafted and ready to file on my mother's behalf. I nodded, but I prayed I wouldn't need any of it. If I stayed quiet, my father would keep controlling the story. My mother would never see a dime of what was stolen from her, and I would spend the rest of my life wearing the word Golddigger in every room my father entered. 2 weeks before the wedding, my father called again. What he said made me stop hoping. The call came on a Wednesday night. I was grading essays at the kitchen table. Daniel was reading on the couch. My phone buzzed. "Dad," I picked up. "I'm doing the father's toast," he said. "No greeting, no small talk. It's tradition." "Of course, Dad." "And I want to talk to the wedding planner. I have things I need to coordinate." I closed my eyes. "I'll give you her number." A pause. Then his voice dropped. Quieter, slower, the way it always got when he wanted his words to land like a slap disguised as advice. "I hope Daniel knows that marrying you doesn't make him family. My family has standards." I sat very still. My pen stopped moving on the essay in front of me. I could hear the refrigerator humming. Daniel looked up from his book. I didn't respond. I ended the call, set my phone on the table, and stared at it like it might ring again. It didn't. That night, I called my grandmother. Maggie picked up on the first ring. She always did, like she kept the phone in her hand waiting for me. "He's going to do something at the wedding, Grandma." "I know, sweetheart." "How do you know?" "Because men like your father can't let other people be happy without making it about themselves. A man who has to tear others down is a man who's scared of what they'll find when they stand up." I was quiet for a moment. Then I made my decision. I pulled the voicemail file from my laptop onto my phone, checked the playback, clear, unmistakable. I plugged it in, backed it up onto a second USB, and handed the spare to Daniel. "Tell Nathan to bring the envelope." Daniel nodded. No questions. He already knew. The next morning, I called Aunt Linda. She picked up fast, like she'd been expecting to hear from me. "Linda, you said Dad was practicing his toast. What did you hear?" She hesitated. "I was at his house for dinner last Sunday. He was in the study with the door open. I heard him reading something out loud. Grace, it wasn't a normal toast. He was practicing something about your mother." My stomach tightened, but my hands were steady. I tried to stop it. "I want you to know that. I didn't go into my wedding hoping for a fight." I called my wedding planner Rachel the next morning. "Is there a way to skip the father's toast? Just have the best man and the maid of honor?" Rachel paused. "Your father already confirmed with the DJ. He specifically asked to go right after the best man's speech. I assumed you'd approved it." He'd gone around me. Of course he had. I called my father. I kept my voice light, the way you do when you're trying to defuse a bomb with a smile. "Dad, Daniel's best man has a really long speech planned. Maybe we cut the father's toast to save time?" Silence. 5 seconds. 10. "Are you trying to silence me?" His voice was ice. "In front of my own family? This is exactly what your mother did." There it was, the pattern. Every time I tried to set a boundary, he'd compare me to her. As though being like my mother was the worst thing a person could be. I knew then, if I canceled the toast, he'd make a scene some other way. He'd pull someone aside during cocktail hour. He'd corner Daniel's parents at the bar. He'd find a microphone or make one out of a wine glass and a loud voice. At least with the scheduled toast, I knew exactly when it would happen. I could be ready. I called the DJ that afternoon. His name was Marcus. I said, "If I come to the booth during the reception, you hand me the aux cable. No questions." Marcus said, "You got it." That night, I lay in bed counting the distance from our table to the DJ booth. Daniel lay beside me, holding my hand in the dark. Neither of us spoke. I counted 17 steps. I practiced the route in my head until I could walk it with my eyes closed. Through the gap between table 4 and table 5, past the dessert station, left at the speaker stack, 17 steps. I spent my last week as a single woman not choosing flowers or finalizing seating charts. I spent it memorizing a path. Because I knew my father, and I knew what he was capable of, and I refused to be caught off guard at my own wedding. The morning of my wedding was bright and still. October sun. No wind. The kind of day that makes you think the universe might be paying attention. I stood in the bridal suite at Carver Estate, a converted barn venue 20 minutes outside the city, white beams, string lights, long wooden tables, and looked at myself in the mirror. My mother stood behind me, adjusting a pin in my hair. Her fingers were gentle, steady. She'd been a nurse for 20 years. Steady hands were the one thing life hadn't taken from her. "You look beautiful, baby," she said. I covered her hand with mine. In the mirror, we looked alike. Same jaw, same dark eyes. I used to hate that resemblance because my father treated it like proof of something rotten. Now I wore it like armor. I pulled my phone from the vanity, opened the audio file, tapped play for half a second, just long enough to hear the first syllable of my father's voice, then stopped. Battery at 100%, Bluetooth backup speaker in my maid of honor's clutch, USB with Daniel. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Nathan's at table 6, envelope in his jacket, ready." I typed back a heart, put the phone in the hidden pocket my seamstress had sewn into the left seam of my dress. I'd asked for it a month ago. She'd raised an eyebrow but didn't ask why. I walked out. 300 guests filled the ceremony lawn. White chairs, hydrangeas along the aisle. The string quartet played something I don't remember. Everything was beautiful. Everything was ready. I passed my father in the hallway. He stood near the entrance, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at me and smiled. "You look nice," he said. "Not beautiful. Not, I'm proud of you." "Nice." I smiled back, kept walking. The ceremony was perfect. The vows, the rings. Daniel's voice cracked when he said, "I do." And the whole crowd laughed, and I loved him so much in that moment that I almost forgot what was coming. We kissed. People cheered. We walked back up the aisle together, and for a few minutes I let myself believe that maybe my father would surprise me. Maybe the toast would be kind. Maybe this one time he'd choose his daughter over his ego. The reception started. Cocktails, dinner, toasts from the best man and the maid of honor, both funny, both warm. 3 hours passed. People danced, people laughed. The cake was chocolate with buttercream and it was perfect. Then the MC picked up the microphone and said the words I'd been dreading all night. "And now, the father of the bride would like to say a few words." My father stood up, adjusted his tie, picked up the microphone, and smiled at me the way he always did, right before he said something cruel. He cleared his throat, tapped the microphone once. The sound popped through the speakers, and 300 people turned toward him. "When Grace was little," he began, "she used to follow me everywhere, to the hardware store, to the mailbox, even to the end of the driveway when I went to get the paper. She was my shadow." A few people laughed softly. An older woman at table 12 said, "Aw," loud enough for the whole room to hear. My father smiled, the good smile, the one he wore to church, to neighborhood barbecues, to parent-teacher conferences where he'd shake the principal's hand and say, "Anything for my girl," the smile that made people trust him. "She was such a sweet girl," he continued. "I always worried about her, because sweetness in this world can be used against you." Something shifted, not in his words yet, in his tone. A slight edge, like a knife turning slowly under a tablecloth. Most people wouldn't have caught it. I caught it immediately. I'd grown up listening for that edge the way other kids listen for thunder. Under the table, my right hand moved to my lap. My fingers found the outline of my phone through the fabric of my dress. The pocket was right where my seamstress had placed it, left seam, just below the hip. I pressed my thumb against the screen through the cloth. Still there. Still ready. Across the room, Daniel sat perfectly still beside me. His posture hadn't changed, but his left hand had moved from the table to the back of my chair. Not touching me. Just there. Close enough to feel. I glanced, quickly, casually, the way you check a clock, toward table 6. Nathan Cole sat between Daniel's college roommate and a woman from my school's front office. He was cutting his steak, jacket on despite the warm room. He looked like any other guest. That was the point. My father raised his glass. But I need to be honest tonight, because honesty is something this family has always valued. 300 people held their glasses, waiting. I held my breath. Grace grew up with certain influences. He let the word hang. Influences. The way someone might say contamination if they were trying to sound polite about it. After her mother and I separated, she chose a path, and I respected that. He paused, pressed his lips together. The wounded father. The man who tried, even when it hurt. A few guests shifted in their seats. Someone at table 7 set down their fork. The room was still smiling, but the smiles were thinner now. The kind people hold when they're not sure what's coming, but sense they should brace. I watched my daughter become someone I didn't recognize, and when she brought home a lawyer, he stopped, turned his head slowly toward Daniel, held the look for 3 full seconds, then a smile, cold, small, deliberate. Well, let's just say I had questions. Murmurs, soft ones. A woman at the table behind me whispered something to her husband. I couldn't hear what. I didn't need to. I could feel the room recalibrating, the way a crowd does when it realizes a toast is becoming something else entirely. At table 3, my mother's knuckles were white around her linen napkin. Beside her, my grandmother placed her hand over my mother's, gently, firmly, the way you'd hold someone's wrist to check a pulse. I looked down at my plate, breathed in through my nose, counted in my head. Not the steps this time, just seconds. Buying myself steadiness. Under the table, Daniel leaned toward me, his mouth close to my ear, so quiet that no one else in the world could have heard it. 17 steps, I'll be right here. I nodded, once, small, and I waited, because my father wasn't done, and I needed him to finish. I needed every person in that room to hear exactly who he was before I showed them proof. My father's voice rose, confident now, feeding on the silence the way he always had. Because in my experience, when a young woman suddenly upgrades her lifestyle, the murmurs were louder now, not agreement, discomfort, chairs creaking, eyes darting, the sound of a room holding its breath and hoping someone would intervene. No one did. My father looked directly at me, not at the crowd, not at Daniel, at me, the way he used to look at me across the dinner table when I was 14 and said something he didn't like, that flat, appraising stare that told me I had already been found guilty. He spoke slowly, every syllable deliberate, as though he'd rehearsed this exact rhythm in front of a mirror. I want everyone here to know the truth. My daughter, she is a gold digger, just like her mother. Silence. Not the polite kind, not the pause between speeches kind. The silence of 300 people collectively losing the ability to speak. A glass clinked somewhere. Someone's hand had knocked it, and the sound was so loud it might as well have been a gunshot. At table 3, my mother made a sound. Quiet. Involuntary. Like the air had been pulled from her chest. Her tears came, but she didn't move. She sat perfectly still, the way she'd trained herself to sit through every insult for 14 years. My grandmother started to rise. My mother's hand found her arm and pulled her back down. Daniel's best man, Kyle, set his whiskey glass on the table so hard the ice rattled. His jaw was tight. He looked at Daniel. Daniel shook his head once. Not yet. My father didn't stop. The silence fed him. I'd seen this before. The way quiet made him louder, braver, more certain he was right. Daniel, if you're smart, you'll get a prenup, because this woman will take everything you have. He paused, smiled. It's in her blood. I set my napkin on the table. I stood up. The chair slid back behind me, a soft scrape on the hardwood that seemed to echo across the entire room. 300 faces turned toward me, some horrified, some frozen, some looking away, ashamed for having witnessed this but unsure what to do about it. I didn't look at my father. I walked toward the DJ booth. 1, 2, 3. I didn't walk toward my father. I didn't need to. The speakers would carry everything I needed them to hear. 4, 5, 6. The room watched me walk. In a wedding dress, every movement is amplified. The fabric catches light, The train drags across the floor with a whisper that sounds louder than it should. I could feel every set of eyes tracking me like I was the last visible thing in the room. My father's voice followed me through the speakers. "See? She's walking away. That's what she does. That's what her mother taught her." He let out a short laugh. Bitter. Performed. When the truth comes out, they run. I kept walking. 7, 8, 9. At the edge of the room, Rachel, my wedding planner, pressed her walkie-talkie to her lips and whispered something. A server near the kitchen door froze mid-step, holding a tray of champagne at a tilt. 10, 11, 12. My father was still talking. He thought I was leaving. He thought I was going to the bathroom, or outside, or to the car. He thought this was a victory, the daughter retreating, the father reclaiming the room. That's the thing about people who've controlled the story for 14 years. They stop imagining anyone else might have one. 13, 14, 15. Marcus, the DJ, saw me coming. He was already reaching for the aux cable. I'd told him one thing, weeks ago. If I come to the booth, no questions. He kept his word. 16, 17. I stopped at the booth, took the cable. My hands were steady, but my heart was somewhere near my throat. I pulled the phone from the pocket in my dress, plugged it in. The screen lit up. The audio file ready, the play button waiting under my thumb. I turned around. 300 people stared at me. My mother, my grandmother, Daniel, Kyle, Nathan at table 6, Rachel by the kitchen, the server with the tilting champagne, and my father, standing in the center of the room with the microphone still in his hand, and a look of faint confusion beginning to crack through his confidence. I leaned into the DJ's microphone. My voice was even, quiet. I didn't need to yell. The speakers would do the work. Since my father values honesty, I thought I'd share some too. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. Not from the microphone in his hand. From the speakers. All of them. Surrounding him. "Hey babe, it's me." He recognized it before anyone else did. I saw the moment. His shoulders stiffened, his grip on the microphone tightened, and the color began to leave his face, starting at his forehead and moving down like a shade being drawn. "Karen's lawyer is useless. I moved the house, Mom's house, into the LLC last month. She'll never find out. By the time the judge signs off, it's done." The room didn't gasp. It went still in a different way than before. Deeper, heavier. Before, they'd been shocked by cruelty. Now they were hearing a confession, and everyone knew whose voice it was. A man at table 8 leaned forward with both hands on the table, as though he needed to physically anchor himself. A woman near the back, one of my father's church friends, brought her fingers to her mouth. Aunt Linda sat at table 11 with both eyes closed. My father's recorded voice kept going. Casual, almost cheerful, talking about his own daughter the way you'd talk about a stray cat that wandered into the yard. "And Grace? Don't worry about her. She's an ungrateful brat. She chose Karen. Fine. She gets nothing. Just like her mother." I watched the room receive those words. 300 people hearing a man call his daughter an ungrateful brat on a voicemail to his mistress, the same man who'd just called her a gold digger 10 seconds ago from this very spot. The pattern was visible now. Not an opinion, a campaign. "Once this is settled, you move in. This house is ours. Karen will never know." The file ended. The speakers hummed into silence. My father stood in the center of 300 staring faces. The microphone was still in his hand, but he wasn't holding it up anymore. It hung at his side like something he'd forgotten he was carrying. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Nobody clapped. This wasn't a movie. This was a wedding reception where 300 real people had just heard a real man confess to fraud on a voicemail meant for his girlfriend. The room fractured the way rooms do when something irreversible happens. Not all at once, but in pieces. A man at table 10 pushed back his chair and stared at the tablecloth. 2 women near the bar whispered to each other, one shaking her head slowly. A teenager at the family table, one of my cousins, looked at his mother with wide, unblinking eyes. Aunt Linda sat at table 11 with her hand over her mouth. She didn't move it. Uncle Jim stared straight ahead, his jaw working but no words forming. Pastor Peters, 3 seats down, had removed his glasses and was pressing his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose, the way you do when you need to rethink everything you've believed about someone. At table 9, my friend Carla was crying. Not loudly, just tears running down her face while she gripped her husband's hand under the table. My father found his voice, hoarse, fast. That's taken out of context. She manipulated the... I spoke into the DJ microphone. Calm. No tremor. That voicemail is 3 minutes long. Everyone just heard all of it. There is no context that makes it okay. He turned, searched the room, looking for backup, looking for a single face that might nod, might agree, might rescue him the way this town had rescued his story for 14 years. Uncle Jim looked away. Pastor Peters didn't raise his head. The church friends at table 8 studied their plates like they held the answers to something. This is my daughter's wedding and she's trying to destroy me. No, Dad. My voice didn't waver. This is my wedding, and you decided to make it about yourself. I just leveled the field. He stared at me. For the first time in my life, my father had nothing to say. And then a chair moved at table 6. Nathan Cole set his napkin on the table. He stood the way lawyers stand, unhurried, deliberate, as though the room had cleared a path for him before he'd even taken a step. He buttoned his jacket with one hand. The other reached inside the left breast and withdrew a manila envelope. Standard size, nothing dramatic, the kind you'd see on any desk in any office in America. He walked toward my father. His shoes were quiet on the hardwood. The room tracked him the way it had tracked me. 300 people watching someone cross a room and understanding, somehow, that what was about to happen would make this night permanent. My father looked at Nathan. He didn't recognize him. Why would he? Nathan was a name on a table card. A +1. Nobody. Who the hell are you? Nathan stopped 3 feet from my father. Professional distance. Eye contact. Nathan Cole, attorney at law. I represent Karen Mitchell in the matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell, a civil action for fraudulent concealment of marital assets. He extended the envelope. My father didn't take it. His hands stayed at his sides, the microphone still dangling from the right one like a dead weight. Nathan placed the envelope on the nearest table, beside a half-eaten slice of cake and a glass of water with a lemon wedge. You've been served, Mr. Mitchell. The words landed in the silence like a stone dropping into a well. You could almost hear the impact reach the bottom. My father looked at the envelope, then at me, then at Daniel, then back at the envelope, as though staring at it long enough might make it disappear. He set the microphone on the table. Slowly, the way you put something down when you know you've lost the right to hold it. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, not fast, not slow, the walk of a man leaving a room where no one was going to ask him to stay. The door closed behind him. A soft click that carried through the silence like a period at the end of a sentence. 5 seconds, maybe 10. The room held still. Then Marcus, the DJ, God bless him, looked at me from the booth. I nodded. The opening notes of At Last by Etta James filled the room. That song. My mother used to hum it to me on the pull-out sofa after we left. My grandmother would sing the chorus while she made tea on Sunday mornings. It wasn't our wedding song. It was something older, something deeper, a song about waiting and the waiting finally being over. Daniel stood up, walked to me, offered his hand. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. May I have this dance? We danced. I don't remember the steps. I remember his hand on my waist and the way the room slowly began to breathe again around us. A few couples stood and joined us on the floor, not because the mood was right, but because they understood that the kindest thing they could do was help this wedding feel like a wedding again. I was trembling. I hadn't noticed it until we were dancing, and then I couldn't stop. Not my hands, my whole body, ribs, shoulders, knees, shaking the way you shake after a car accident, when the danger is over, but your body hasn't gotten the message. Daniel held me tighter. Didn't say a word, just held. When the song ended, I walked back to the DJ's microphone. My voice was hoarse now, but I didn't try to hide it. I owe everyone here an apology for the disruption. This is not how I imagined tonight. I took a breath. My father and I have a complicated history. What you heard is a voicemail he left for his girlfriend, while he was still married to my mother, about hiding assets from the divorce court. The room was so quiet, I could hear the ice machine humming in the catering kitchen. My mother spent 14 years working night shifts as a nurse to raise me alone. She is not a gold digger. She is the strongest person I know. I pointed toward table 3. And she's sitting right there. My mother was crying. My grandmother had both arms around her. They looked small at that big round table. Two women who'd spent 14 years being small so a man could feel big. A chair scraped at table 2. Daniel's mother, Patricia Prescott, a retired school principal with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck, stood up. She crossed the room to table 3. She didn't say anything at first. She just put her arms around my mother, held her. Then quietly, "You raised a remarkable daughter." My mother broke. Not the held-together kind of crying from before, the real kind. The kind that sounds like something being unlocked after a very long time. And the thing my father feared most had already happened. His daughter wasn't rejected by her new family. She was claimed. What followed wasn't dramatic. It was just people, real people, deciding who they believed. Aunt Linda reached me first. She took both my hands and said, in a voice that cracked down the middle, "I'm sorry. I should have seen it sooner." I squeezed her hands. I didn't have words yet, so I just held on. Uncle Jim stood up from his table. He didn't come to me. He didn't go to the microphone. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair and walked out the side door without looking at anyone. Not defending his brother, not condemning him either, just leaving, the way people do when they realize the version of someone they've defended for years was never real. At the church table, Pastor Peters sat very still. He'd put his glasses back on, but wasn't looking through them, just staring at the space where my father had stood. I watched him process. 14 years of Richard's been through so much, rearranging themselves in real time behind his eyes. He didn't speak to me that night. He didn't need to. I could see it landing. My colleagues from school, Carla, Doug, 2 women from the front office, came to me as a group. Carla hugged me so hard my ribs ached. Doug shook Daniel's hand and said, "We always knew you were tough, Mitchell. Now we know why." Rachel, the wedding planner, appeared at my elbow, calm, professional. She touched my arm and spoke to the room through the MC's microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's continue celebrating the bride and groom." And somehow, impossibly, they did. The music came back. People returned to the dance floor, not with the same energy as before, something quieter, more deliberate, like they were choosing to be there rather than just being there. The bar reopened. Someone told a joke at table 4, and 3 people laughed too loud, the way you laugh when you need to release something. Daniel pulled out my chair. I sat down, and for the first time all night, truly for the first time, I exhaled. The party continued. People danced. People laughed. But I knew the real aftermath wouldn't happen tonight. It would happen Monday morning. By 11 o'clock, the crowd had thinned to a handful of close friends, the catering crew, and my family. The string lights were still on. The hydrangeas had started to droop in their vases. Half-eaten cake on paper plates. Napkins crumpled like small white flags of surrender on every table. I sat at table 3, my mother on one side, my grandmother on the other, the same formation we'd held for 14 years, just the 3 of us at a small table getting through. My mother took my hand. Her grip was different now, not the desperate clutch from earlier. Gentle, tired, finished. "You didn't have to do that for me," she said. "I didn't do it for you, Mom." I looked at her, then at my grandmother, then at both of them, these 2 women who had carried me and fed me and held me together when the world tried to take me apart. I did it for us, all 3 of us. My grandmother reached across the table and cupped my face with both hands. Her palms were cool and papery and smelled like the rose lotion she'd worn my entire life. "Your grandfather would have been so proud," she said. I looked at the ring on my left hand. The diamond was small. Daniel and I had picked it together from an antique shop because I wanted something with history. It caught the string lights and threw tiny specks of white across the tablecloth. I looked around the emptying reception hall, the dance floor still sticky from spilled champagne. A single balloon drifting near the ceiling. The DJ booth where, 2 hours ago, I'd pressed a button and changed everything. 14 years ago, my mother packed 2 suitcases and drove us away from that house in silence. I didn't grab the photos off the wall. I didn't grab anything. Now I had new photos, my own. Daniel appeared behind me. His tie was loose, his sleeves were rolled up, he smelled like cake frosting and aftershave. "Ready to go, Mrs. Prescott?" I laughed, the first real laugh of the night. The kind that happens when you've been holding everything so tight that when you finally let go, the relief sounds like joy. "Almost. Give me 1 more minute." I hugged my mother, long and hard, the kind of hug you give someone when you both know what it cost to get here. I hugged my grandmother, her small frame solid against mine. And then I stood up, took my husband's hand, and walked out into the October night. The air was cool, the stars were out, and for the first time in 14 years, I wasn't carrying anything that didn't belong to me. The morning after my wedding, I woke up in the honeymoon suite of a hotel I'd booked with a teacher's salary and a coupon from a travel app. Daniel was already awake beside me, phone to his ear, speaking quietly. I heard Nathan's voice on the other end, tinny through the speaker, but clear enough to follow. "Process is clean. He's been served. Karen's case is officially filed with the county clerk as of 9 this morning. The property records are public, the LLC transfer, the dates, everything. It's documented and it's strong, Daniel." Daniel thanked him and hung up. He turned to me. Morning light through the curtains. His hair was sticking up on one side. He looked like a man who'd slept 3 hours and lived 3 years in the span of a single night. "Are you okay?" I thought about it. Not the polite version, the real one. "I think so. I think this is what okay feels like when you've never had it." He didn't try to fix that sentence, he just lay there and let it be true. Later that morning, I called my mother. She picked up on the first ring. "I talked to Nathan this morning," she said. Her voice was steady, steadier than I'd heard it in years. "He explained the case. He explained what the next steps look like. I'm scared, Grace, but I'm ready." I leaned against the headboard of a hotel bed and felt something shift in my chest. Relief, not the giddy, celebratory kind, the structural kind, the feeling of a load being distributed after years of being carried alone. "You don't have to be brave alone anymore, Mom," she cried. But it was different this time. Not the quiet, wall-muffled crying I'd heard through the apartment when I was 15. Not the silent tears at table 3. This was open, full-throated, the sound of someone finally letting a wound breathe. I didn't try to stop her. Some tears are not a problem to be solved. They're a process. You let them run. My father started making calls before the sun was up on Sunday. I know this because Aunt Linda told me. She was the first person he dialed. "He called me 6 times before 8 a.m., she said when she reached me that afternoon. "He says you set him up. He says the recording is fake. He says you edited it or someone impersonated his voice or... I don't know, Grace. He had 5 different explanations and none of them matched." "Do you believe him?" A long pause, the kind where you can hear someone choosing between loyalty and truth. "No." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I heard his voice, Grace. Everybody heard his voice. That was him." My father called Uncle Jim next, then Pastor Peters, then 3 couples from the church hospitality committee and a deacon named Frank who my father played poker with on Thursday nights. The pitch was the same everywhere. Grace is manipulative. She planned this. She's doing exactly what her mother did. But here's the thing about a voicemail played through high-quality wedding venue speakers in front of 300 witnesses. You can't unhear it. Every person in that room had listened to Richard Mitchell, in his own voice, describe how he'd hidden a $680,000 house from the divorce court, call his daughter an ungrateful brat, and promise his girlfriend a future built on stolen assets. No amount of phone calls could rewrite that. By Tuesday, Pastor Peters called my mother, the first time in 14 years. "Karen, I owe you an apology." His voice was heavy, old-sounding, even though he was only in his 60s. "I believed Richard's version for too long. I'm sorry." My mother was quiet for a moment. She set the phone down, looked out the window at the parking lot of her apartment complex, then picked it up again. Thank you, Pastor. That means more than you know. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. An apology 14 years late isn't a cure. But it's an acknowledgement that the wound was real. And sometimes that's the part that takes the longest to arrive. Meanwhile, Richard discovered the source. He'd called Vanessa Reed. And her number was disconnected, changed, gone. The woman he'd trusted with his secrets had handed those secrets to the woman he'd betrayed, and then vanished from his life completely. He was calling into voids now, every line dead, every ally silent, every door he'd spent years propping open, closed. 2 weeks after the wedding, Nathan called a three-way with me and my mother. He was all business, no pleasantries, no dramatic pauses, just facts. Richard's attorney reached out this morning. They want to settle out of court. Nobody was surprised. My father knew what was in the public record. He knew the voicemail existed. He knew 300 people could be called as witnesses to his own words. Going to trial would be a spectacle he couldn't afford, financially or otherwise. His opening offer, $100,000. Nathan's response was one sentence. The house was appraised at $680,000 at the time of the divorce. Your client concealed it. We're seeking equitable distribution plus damages. My father's lawyer pushed back. Of course he did. That's what lawyers do. There were 6 weeks of calls, emails, counteroffers, and document exchanges. Nathan handled all of it. My mother didn't have to sit in a room with Richard. She didn't have to see him. She just had to sign where Nathan told her to sign and trust the process. The final number? $340,000. 50% of the home's value at the time of the divorce. My father would have to liquidate the LLC, sell the house his mother had left him, to pay it. The house where he'd lived for 14 years. The house he'd stolen from the settlement. My mother received the wire transfer on a Thursday afternoon. She was at work, mid-shift at the hospital, when the notification came through on her phone. She told me later that she walked into the break room, sat down on a plastic chair, and just looked at the number. For the first time, she said, I can breathe. She didn't buy anything with it, not right away. She put it in a savings account, the first real savings she'd had since the divorce, and let it sit there. Not because she was frugal, because she needed time to believe it was real. After 14 years of being told she deserved nothing, she needed to sit with the fact that the system had finally said otherwise. I didn't take a cent. I never wanted the money. I wanted the record corrected. I wanted my mother's name cleared. I wanted the word Golddigger to land back where it belonged, on the man who stole from his own family and called it survival. 3 months after my wedding, my father stepped down from the church council. Nobody asked him to resign, not officially, but Pastor Peters had a conversation with him, the kind of conversation that happens in a quiet office with the door closed and no witnesses. I don't know exactly what was said. Aunt Linda told me only this. The pastor told Richard the congregation has questions. He suggested Richard step back for a while. A while is a gentle word for permanently. Everyone knew it. My father knew it. But phrasing it that way let the church avoid a scandal, and let Richard avoid the humiliation of being removed. A mutual fiction. The kind communities build when the truth is too uncomfortable to state plainly. His social circle contracted the way circles do in small-town America, not with confrontation, but with absence. The Thursday poker game continued, but Frank stopped calling to remind Richard of the time. The neighborhood barbecues still happened, but the invitations got lost in the mail. Nobody said, "You're not welcome." They just stopped making room. He sold the house. He had to. The settlement required it. The LLC was dissolved. The 4-bedroom on the quiet street with the porch and the dog-friendly yard went to a young couple from out of state who had no idea what had happened inside those walls. My father moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town, alone. Vanessa was long gone. There was no one new. Aunt Linda still visited him. Once a week, Sundays. She'd bring dinner and sit with him for an hour. She told me once, "You need help, Richard. Real help. Not the kind where you tell a therapist everyone else is the problem." I don't know if he listened. I knew all of this secondhand, through Linda mostly. I didn't track my father's decline. I didn't check on his apartment or his social calendar. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard about the poker game or the church council. I felt something quieter, sadder. The specific sadness of knowing your father had 1,000 chances to be decent and chose, every single time, not to be. He wasn't a monster. That's the part people don't understand. Monsters are easy to leave. My father was a man who remembered my favorite ice cream flavor and still chose to destroy my wedding. That's harder. My mother enrolled in a nurse practitioner certification program 3 months after the settlement cleared. She was 55 years old, sitting in a lecture hall with students half her age, taking notes in a spiral notebook with a pen she'd clipped to her scrubs pocket out of habit. She told me she was terrified the first day. By the second week, she loved it. She'd spent 14 years in survival mode, working doubles, clipping coupons, choosing between a new winter coat and a car repair. The settlement didn't make her rich. It gave her margin, enough to reduce her shifts, pay tuition, and breathe between obligations for the first time since the divorce. My grandmother moved in with her. They found a 2-bedroom apartment with good light and a balcony that faced east. Maggie hung a bird feeder on the railing. She said she liked having something to take care of that couldn't talk back. The first time I visited the new apartment, I stood in the kitchen and looked at the refrigerator. And I had to hold on to the counter. On the door, held up with magnets. My wedding photo. Me and Daniel laughing, the cake in the background. Next to it, a snapshot of my mother in her lecture hall raising her hand. And below both of those, yellowed and slightly curled at the edges, my honor roll certificate from 9th grade, the one I'd earned the semester we left. The one I thought had been lost when we walked out of my father's house with 2 suitcases and nothing else. I found it in the box with the USB, my mother said from behind me. I kept it all these years. I just never had a fridge I felt proud enough to put it on. I cried. Not because it was sad, because it was the opposite of sad. Because my mother had carried a piece of paper through 14 years of night shifts and 1-bedroom apartments and $40,000 settlements and never once put it down. She'd been waiting, not for the money, not for the apology, not even for the truth. She'd been waiting for a refrigerator that felt like home, and now she had one. 4 months after the wedding, I received an email from my father. I saw his name in my inbox at 7 in the morning, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee and a stack of ungraded quizzes. Daniel was in the shower. The apartment was quiet, and there it was. Richard Mitchell, subject line, the truth. I opened it. I read every word. It took about a minute. It was not an apology. It was not a confession. It was not a man reckoning with what he'd done. It was a page-long exercise in the exact same narrative he'd been telling for 14 years, repackaged with fresh self-pity and delivered to my inbox like a bill I owed him. I hope you're happy now that you've destroyed your own father's life. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me. Your mother poisoned you against me from the day she left. I hope one day you see the truth. That I was the one who was wronged. That I was the one who lost everything. That I was the victim. I set my phone on the table, looked at the ceiling, took a long breath, let it out. Then I picked up the phone and typed my response. Short, clear, final. Dad, I didn't destroy your life. Your choices did. I wish you well, but I can't have a relationship with someone who refuses to take responsibility. This is my boundary. Please respect it. I read it once, changed nothing, hit send. Then I blocked his email address. I didn't pause. I didn't second guess. I didn't feel the pull of guilt that would have flattened me a year ago. I'd spent 14 years leaving the door open for a man who only walked through it to break things. The door was closed now, and I was the one who closed it. Daniel came out of the shower, towel around his neck, saw my face. You okay? I will be. He sat down across from me. Didn't push, didn't ask to see the email, just sat, poured himself coffee, started on the crossword, and the morning continued. The way mornings do when you've finally stopped waiting for someone to change. 1 year after my wedding, Daniel and I live in a rented apartment 12 minutes from my school, 2 bedrooms. One of them is a home office where I grade papers and Daniel reviews contracts. The walls are white, the couch is secondhand. The coffee maker costs $19 at Target and it works fine. I still teach English. 10th graders. I still pack my lunch in Tupperware and eat it in the faculty lounge next to a woman named Denise who talks about her cats like they're senators. I still drive the Honda Civic, though it now has 163,000 miles and a rattle in the dashboard that Daniel swears he'll fix on Saturday but never does. Nothing has changed on the outside. Everything has changed underneath. I sleep through the night now. I hadn't realized I wasn't sleeping until I started. The difference was like putting on glasses for the first time and understanding that trees have individual leaves. I don't lie in bed counting the ceiling tiles. I don't rehearse conversations with my father at 2 a.m. I don't check my phone in the morning with a knot in my stomach, bracing for whatever he might have texted. The knot is gone. I didn't notice it leaving. One morning it just wasn't there, and I stood in the kitchen and cried into my cereal, and Daniel asked if I was okay, and I said, I think this is the first morning I've ever woken up. Not afraid. And he held me, and the cereal got soggy, and it was the most ordinary, beautiful morning of my life. People ask me if I regret what I did at my wedding, and here's the honest answer. I regret that it was necessary. I wish my father had given a normal toast. I wish he'd said, I'm proud of you. I wish the voicemail didn't exist. But it does. And pretending it didn't would not have protected anyone. It would have protected him. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're survival. My mother passed her nurse practitioner exam on the second attempt. She cried in the parking lot of the testing center and called me from the driver's seat with her hands still shaking. Her starting salary in the new role is nearly double what she made as a staff nurse. She's not wealthy, she's stable. And for a woman who spent 14 years choosing between groceries and car insurance, stable is everything. My grandmother Maggie still lives with her. She's 80 now and slower than she used to be, but she still makes Sunday dinner for the four of us. Pot roast, green beans, rolls from scratch. Daniel does the dishes after. Maggie supervises from the kitchen doorway and tells him he's loading the dishwasher wrong. He loads it wrong on purpose because it makes her laugh. Aunt Linda calls me every few weeks. She doesn't push reconciliation. She just talks. About the weather, about her garden, about a book she's reading. Sometimes, casually, she'll mention my father. He's seeing a therapist now. I don't know if it's working, but he's going. I listen. I don't comment. I don't hope, and I don't despair. I just take the information, set it somewhere neutral, and move on. Linda understands that. She's the only person from my father's side who earned the right to stay, and she earned it by never once asking me to forgive him on his timeline. Nathan still works with Daniel. They play golf on Saturday mornings, badly from what I hear. The last time Nathan came to Sunday dinner at my mother's, he sat at the table, and Maggie served him an extra roll without asking. He looked at me across the table and grinned. I said, Table 6 will never be just a table to me. He laughed. Maggie asked what was funny. Nobody explained. Pastor Peters invited my mother back to the church last month. She said she'd think about it. She's still thinking. If you're watching this and you have a parent who makes you feel small, at the dinner table, on the phone, in the quiet way they look at you when they think you're not enough, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Every family is different. Every wound is shaped differently. I don't know your father. I don't know your mother. I don't know what you've survived or what you're still surviving. But I'll tell you what I learned. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they share your blood. Love is not a debt. Showing up to Thanksgiving and swallowing insults is not loyalty. It's erosion. And standing up for yourself is not betrayal, no matter how many times they tell you it is. My father called me a gold digger in front of 300 people. What he didn't know is that the only gold I ever wanted was the truth. And the truth is this. My mother is not a gold digger. She is a nurse practitioner who raised me alone on night shifts and leftovers and a savings account that spent most years close to zero. I am not a gold digger. I'm a public school teacher who married a man I love, not for his money, not for his last name, not for his law degree, but for the way he stood beside me in the hardest moment of my life and said, 17 steps, I'll be right here. 17 steps. That's how far I had to walk to change everything. But the real distance wasn't 17 steps. It was 14 years. 14 years of silence. 14 years of showing up to holidays where I wasn't wanted. 14 years of answering the phone and hearing my father's voice and hoping every single time, McGay, that this would be the call where he said, I'm sorry. That call never came. So I made a different one. I chose myself. I chose my mother. I chose the truth. And if you need permission to do the same, consider this yours. Last Sunday, my mother's apartment. The one with the good light and the bird feeder on the balcony. We're sitting around the kitchen table. Me, Daniel, my mother, my grandmother. The table is small. Our elbows almost touch. There's pot roast and green beans and rolls from scratch, and Daniel has already eaten 3 rolls and Maggie is pretending not to notice. My mother is laughing. Not the careful kind of laughing she used to do, the kind that checked the room first to make sure it was safe. Real laughing. Loud. She's telling a story about a patient who brought a parrot to the clinic, and Maggie is shaking her head and saying, "Lord have mercy," even though she's laughing too. And Daniel is wiping his eyes with a napkin because he's laughing so hard he can't breathe. I'm just sitting here, watching them. On the refrigerator behind my mother's head, our wedding photo, slightly crooked. Her nurse practitioner certificate in a cheap gold frame. And below both, held up by a magnet shaped like a sunflower, my honor roll certificate from 9th grade, yellowed, curled, 14 years old, still there. I look at that refrigerator, and I think about the one in my father's house, the one I grew up with, covered in everyone else's achievements, where I once taped my own certificate and found it gone by morning. This fridge is different. This fridge holds everything. Daniel nudges me under the table. "You okay?" I look at him, then at my mother, then at my grandmother, 80 years old, arthritic hands wrapped around a coffee mug, still the strongest person at the table. "Yeah," I say. "I'm good." This is my family, not the one I was born into, the one I chose, and the one that chose me back. Thank you for listening. And if this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of a boundary you need to set, or a truth you've been carrying alone, or a phone call you've been afraid to make, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have pressed play, or would you have walked away? There's no wrong answer. Both take courage. And if you'd like to hear another story, there's one waiting for you in the description. I'll see you there.